Hello. So, this is my third journal entry, and for the module of Evolve to Move. And yeah, so I called my mom yesterday and asked. I don't really have like a lot of memory from my childhood, especially like first couple years. So I called my mom and I asked her some questions about how I moved, developed like physically, and yeah, and I just kind of want to like share and contemplate a little bit about what I received from my mother. Yeah, she told me that I started walking at 9 months, and all of my sisters, I have 2 older sisters, and we're all like, I'm 28, then Shanti's 29, and Emily's 30. So it's like my mom basically like stayed pregnant for three years straight. Yeah, but she said like all of us generally walked around 9 months, and yeah, she told me that I was a very like maybe even hyperactive baby, that yeah, when I ever since she can remember, I would pull myself up in the crib, and when I would like wake up, and I would shake the bars of my crib, and that I would shake the screws loose. And same if she put me in a playpen, I would, shake the playpen. And it was like I didn't like to be in like a confined space. And as soon as I was up, I was like, okay, ready to go, let's do it. And yeah, around 1 month, I started rolling, which I don't know like what the standard is, but for me that like sounds a little early. But yeah, she said at like 1 month I was rolling, and around like 4 months I was like crawling, and also like sitting and leaning forward. And yeah, and this kind of connects more to the discussion in class that we had, but because I was kind of asking her about like the swing and rocking, and like I used to kind of like do this thing a lot when I was a kid, and like really loved it, and was like really intense about it. And I found out that when I was still in my mother's womb, that she would sit in the rocking chair, and she would read me a book while she was still pregnant with me every night, because she knew that I could hear that. And so yeah, that was really special, and that was like a routine that I found while still in the womb, of this rocking. And then also I was the only child that she breastfed, so we had a nighttime routine as well, for the first year of my life, where I never actually fell asleep in the crib. She would rock me to sleep while I was breastfeeding, and then put me in the crib. And I also asked about like belly time, because I've heard before about like the importance of like physical development through tummy time. And she said that like when I was awake, she would always put me on my back, but when I was sleeping, she would always put me on my belly. So and like me and all of my sisters slept on our belly as infants. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, and I wonder if like maybe that's why I learned to like roll over so quickly, to be able to then like grab the rails of the crib and like pull myself up. So if like kind of returning, which I'm still integrating, and I'm still like moving into like understanding like the homologous push. There's like a reach, and there's a push. And yeah, let's see here. There's homologous, there's I'm gonna need to pull this up really quick, honestly. It's just like right here. Shibbity dap dap doo. Okay, so there's like spinal push from head, spinal push from pelvic floor, homologous push from hands and feet, homolateral push from hands and feet, spinal reach from head and from pelvic floor, and homologous reach from hands and feet, and contralateral reach from hands and feet. So I want to say this would be a homologous reach from the hands that I was doing, because I was like using my upper body to grab onto the rails, like reaching for the rails, and then pulling myself. And maybe also some like spinal reach from the head happening too, like kind of going back to like being a baby and like not knowing how to walk, or like immediately sit up and like being on my belly, and like to then like, yeah, kind of like pushing with my head. When I kind of think of like grabbing the rails, pulling myself up, like pushing from the head so that I can like lift my lower legs, which then that like lifting, once I've already like made that reach, I feel like also maybe there is a homologous push from my feet as I'm like pushing to stand up. And yeah, and I honestly, so homolateral, I guess, is like the left and the right, where homologous is maybe like the top or the bottom. And so yeah, those movements would be homologous, and also some spinal movements. Yeah, let me go back to my notes from when I talked to my mama. Yeah, and then also on the paper, it kind of like, there was kind of like a practice of going back to your childhood, which is kind of like the inspiration of this journal. And like, yeah, like in the first year of life, like touching back with like rolling, inchworming, lizard crawling, crawling on all fours, independent sitting, walking, speed of development and coordination, family attitude. So yeah, like I feel like I was my like speed of development and coordination was quite quickly, and I had a 1 and 2 year old sister, my mom said that like really rarely where we put in playpens or something like that, and instead she kind of would like just let us like free range around whatever. And often she would make a big pallet and she would put a bunch of our toys, and then we would all kind of like hang out on the pallet. And she said that like especially my oldest sister, but like both of my older sisters, but especially my oldest sister, was very like interactive with me. So like at a really, really young age, it was like, you know, they were helping me roll over, they were helping me sit up, they were, you know, very like, oh, there's this new baby, and So yeah, I feel like that definitely is like a piece of that family attitude, and that like influences the speed of development and coordination. And because like what my mom was telling me is that my sisters like to do everything for me, or like and which, yeah, I guess you could like perceive that in two different ways. It could be like, okay, if they're always like helping me sit up, then how am I like learning to sit up? But I think the fact that like there was the realization in my body, like instead of like kind of being like the only baby and kind of like figuring it out on my own, I'm like also seeing these very like younger bodies that are also like still very much so like exploring their bodies, who are like, yeah, and this is sitting up. And like, so I kind of had that reference maybe earlier. So yeah, I feel like it actually increased the speed of my development instead of decreasing it. But also my mom said that one thing that did like decrease in speed was my talking, because my sisters would always talk for me, and so I guess I just like didn't feel the need to develop speaking. I know this like isn't with the body, but I feel like it could in a way kind of relate. Like maybe there was things that were compromised in my physical development as well, with my sisters wanting to be so involved with my development. But my mom said I didn't talk for a long time, and then when I did start talking, I talked a lot, and I talked really fast, and no one could understand me because I had so much to say in such little time. And like I kind of had like speech impediment problems because I never took the time to learn how to actually pronounce something, because I was just talking so fast. And as long as, you know, it was kind of like that, I like got the nickname Magpie. It's like, or like Megpie, from like the magpie bird that's like rah, rah, rah. So yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, I contemplate reflecting on knowing that like my speech developed later, and then it was like and knowing that I was like a very hyperactive child. Yeah, I'm curious like how that influenced my physical development and coordination, and possibly like I put more of that effort into my physical development instead of my verbal development. And so maybe that's kind of where I like, that was like my outlet, and like potentially that could be one reason why I like developed pretty quickly as well. Yeah, and I guess I was like all over the place, and like just like very hyper child. And the last thing that I will mention is that my mom said that I was like really strong when I was born, and like within 2 weeks I could like completely lift my head, and that all of me and all of my sisters were like had really strong bodies, that and we like, and strong necks where our head wasn't all like wobbly. Like really quickly we had like full control over like our head and being able to move it around. And it's interesting because I've witnessed one birth in this life, and it was one of my best friends, and I kind of like helped postpartum, and it really amazed me because I had always heard about like, you know, make sure you like hold the baby's head, and like, and Liam is his name, right away. Like, he never actually needed that neck support. Now, maybe he did, or like, you know, I don't know, like, I'm not like fully knowledgeable in these things, but it seemed as if, like, you know, right away he could actually hold his head up, and he didn't actually need that support from like literally day one. I just like remembered noting like, wow, like he has such a strong head and neck. And like I remember like seeing my friend breastfeed him, and the way that she would hold him, she wouldn't really need to support his head, and because like he had enough like support within his muscles already. So yeah, it like reminds me of that too, and kind of gets me like contemplating into like what influences that that muscle development, and why like some babies are very like woo, and then like where like some babies have like a much stronger ability to hold up their head, which I don't know the answer to, but yeah, it's kind of just where my mind goes. Yeah, and with that, I feel pretty complete with this journal entry. And yeah, just like contemplating early movement, and yeah, early motor development, and what that looked like for me. And yeah, I really appreciate this contemplation, and kind of like, yeah, investigating into how I developed as a baby, and kind of getting to know more about those very, very new moments of human experience for me, and feel really grateful that my mom has that memory, and that she is here for me to ask her about that. And yeah, I would love to inquire more. One thing that was really like stuck with me throughout this like journaling contemplation is like the homologous pulling from the hands, and pushing or reaching from the hands, and pushing from the feet, and also maybe some pushing from the spine. And yeah, potentially how that has influenced my body. I have this like pretty consistent like knot that's like right next to my spine. And when I have done like like spinal networking before in the past, there's like one spot a little higher on the right side right next to my spine, and then lower on the left side of my spine. And these two places hold a lot of trauma, a lot of memory. It's like something that like every time it was worked on, it was like something that my body has been holding would come up to like be felt through. Like I'd be put in these like certain positions, and all of a sudden I'm like feeling so angry, feeling so emotional, feeling really irritated. I'm like, oh my God, how much longer do I have to stay in this position? And like, and the way that the spinal networking like practitioner did his work is he like, you know, put you in these subtle movements that then kind of invite these like holdings from deeper in your body to surface, to feel through. And then like once it was surfaced, the body would actually like present that part on my spine differently, and then he would push it, and he would put a lot of pressure into it. And on both sides, the right and the left, multiple times there were times where he would push it, and literally I would feel and hear like a pop, and it was like this like pop in my muscle. Like it wasn't like, you know, like cracking my back or something. It was like almost like if it was a knot and you like pushed into this knot and it like exploded in a way. And the crazy thing is that like multiple times, you know, it would pop, and then I would like go through this whole thing like that week, like all this emotion would come up, and then I would go back, and like, I don't know, maybe like 2-3 sessions later, it would like pop again, and there was like deeper like unraveling of like what this emotionally that my body is holding on to. And like I also have this this like thing with my spine. I have scoliosis, and like the way that it pushes into my right shoulder blade. And one of my great friends is a visionary craniosacral therapist, and she was doing sessions on me for a period of time. And when she would work on my right shoulder blade, she would get this really strong sense of, you know, like when my shoulder blade would communicate with her, and this like space in my back, it was very like protective in the sense of like, you know, I would tell her like, don't just try to get rid of me. Like, I actually hold like a deep well of wisdom that like just hasn't came to the surface. And so like that's really interesting, because there is like this big thing that causes me like structural, postural problems with like my right shoulder blade and like spine kind of curving. And I've always had this sense that if I was able to really access like what my body is holding on to, that my spine would straighten. And it's literally just a matter of actually going into the emotional holding of that has like influenced the structure and posture of my spine. But also it's like yeah, I guess to find the right kind of therapy, the right practitioner to really like move through these things. And then also it's like a very paced thing. Like I did neurospinal networking for a whole year, and it was intense. It was like a really intense year, because that whole year I was moving through stuff, and like literally like needing to just like clear my body and my energy field all the time, like multiple times a day, because it was just constantly these things coming up somatically that I was like, okay, and like now I can actually move through these. And yet still I feel these places and where there's more holding, like it's real, like truly is such a deep well. And so yeah, like reading about these like therapy sessions and tying in like traumas and the way that people are relationally relating, being connected to like how the spine is, what is like happening in the body, and through like really intentionally shifting both of those, something like really felt so resonant for me. And like immediately I was like, oh, like I need to find like a therapist that does this kind of therapy. I feel that. And like, I know I said like last piece like 10 minutes ago or something, but the last piece I'll like put with this, and this like deep holding in my spine in these places, is that as a kid, I held so much in. It wasn't really safe. My perception is that it wasn't safe to express myself. Even my joy was too much for my dad, and like my energy. So it was like shamed, and like, you know, I'd always be met with this like aggression. So I kind of like learned that my joy was unwelcomed, let alone like any other emotion. Like, geez, if I'm like pissing off my dad because I'm happy, like what a danger if I'm any other emotion. Like, what kind of pissed off is my dad gonna be then, kind of thing was the is the belief that I developed. So my protection technique was to hold it all in. And I had this like trait of like toxic positivity, and these like things would happen and I would just be like, oh, it's okay, like this is God's plan, and like it's okay. And like deep inside I was like feeling these things, but I like did my best to numb it and to deny it. And so I think that because I had this pattern for so many years, into my early 20s, until when I like realized that I had been holding so much emotion, and not allowing myself to feel it, and I had this belief around emotion and feeling, and it being weak, and it being it took you away from the happiness, and the point is to be happy. And like, I had these very like disempowering beliefs around emotion, around feeling. And yeah, so I feel like because I carried that pattern for so many years, that my body held on to a lot. And it's been quite the journey when I like first acknowledged like, oh, like I kind of can't feel. And I like very intensely, like anytime I like subtly felt anything, I would really dive into it. And I was like, okay, we're like creating the space, like we're gonna feel this. And the first thing that came out was a lot of anger, so much anger. And I had no idea like how to hold space for it. Like I did not have any tools for how to manage anger, except for like the way I saw my dad manage it, which was like not healthy. So I had this like really unhealthy expression of anger that was like explosive, and it was this like inner child who was pissed the fuck off. And I didn't and I think I was like 23 at this point, and I would have never thought that my inner child, that this like younger version of me, was actually like extremely pissed about her childhood. Because when I like looked back at my childhood, I just remember like making light of everything and like, oh yeah, it wasn't that bad. But then, yeah, so, and I feel like I've kind of moved through and like felt through a lot of that like surface anger that I like lived in my body. And now I find that I'm actually can like tap into these deep wells of grief quite often, and that there's more of like the sadness and the grief that I'm finding in my body, and like that there's like these layers to it, and that maybe I've like felt through a lot of the layers of anger that kind of have like protected the grief in a way, and me like feeling the grief. So yeah, I feel like I'm definitely like very still actively on the journey of like feeling through so much that my spine has held on to. And from a really really young age, even developing, like I already was seeing these places that were unsafe. So yeah, it sparks like a curiosity within me to explore this with a therapist. And yeah, okay, now I feel complete for sure. Yeah, I hope that you have a good day, or whatever time it is. If you even watch this video, maybe you will pick other ones to watch. But